being gay and being Mormon is kind of like trying to put on a dress every day that doesn't quite fit. Every day of the week you're going to wear that dress and do your best, but sooner or later it gets pretty old. I grew up in a small town in Iowa with about 5,000 people. It was the kind of place you rode your bike to the library or to school or wherever you wanted to go. And as you got older, you quickly learned that there were ways to be and ways not to be, but you didn't want to violate a whole lot of that. You just had to keep it in. And so I would have rather played with dolls or played house or whatever, but I went to play Little League with my brother and things like that instead. And my family got involved in the LDS church when I was a kid. I think my mom joined when I was 6, and I joined the church at 17. And that, I didn't connect at the time how difficult one hidden side of my personality would make the other side. It was pretty tough to see everything that was going to come my direction. So I managed to keep going. I went to college for a couple years in Iowa, and then I served a mission for the LDS church down in South Florida. It was a great experience. I had a lot of fun. Learned what it was like to have a crush on a companion that you had to live with and be with 24 hours a day. That was kind of hard. He's a great guy and still a friend, but man, that was challenging, hard experience. I should have figured out at that age that, you know, you're pretty much gay, especially when I showed up at college and they make you take this personality test and they assign you dorm rooms, and they put me in a room with a very effeminate gay guy right across the hall from 2 other gay guys, right next to 2 other gay guys, and none of us knew each other until that day. We were all in the closet, all hiding it. This was before the days of Will and Grace, mind you. So but I didn't figure it out. And I didn't figure it out necessarily on the mission. I thought it was just something to be tucked away. I could put it away. But that isn't the way the world works. I ended up here at BYU in good old Provo, Utah, and I finished a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. I still wasn't married. I think my bishop thought I was a freak. But I didn't necessarily recognize that I wanted any other sort of a life. A year later, I met a woman that I cared about, and she and I fell in love. I think the only reason I was able to love her is because she started it. And all the emotional relationships I had with women, they started it. She had kids. It was like baggage. And I had baggage because I was a Latter-day Saint who was too attracted to men. And we got married, and I helped her raise her kids, get her through college. We have 2 beautiful sons that I love dearly. And time goes by, and you just keep putting on that dress every day. She grew kind of unhappy after a while. She wanted to go to graduate school and decided to do so. Unfortunately, that was in another state. And that was kind of the time when the marriage just started deteriorating. Emotionally, we grew apart. It was harder and harder. And every day I recognized more and more what was really going on inside me. And it was challenging. Ultimately, she came back, and she and I were sitting on the bed. I could tell she was angry about something. I didn't know what. And she confronted me and just said, "Are you gay?" And I said, "Yes." And I felt this enormous weight, like, lifted off of me. I'd never told my parents, my brother, my sister, or anyone to speak of that I was. And it was like an emotional release, really powerful. We managed to make it another year or so while she finished up her studies, and then she moved away for good, and life changed. And the whole time, it was forcing me into trying to come to grips with how do you live as a Latter-day Saint and recognize that God didn't make you to be a square peg in a square slot. There's no easy answer. There's no right answer, and I can't find perfect answers. I came to the conclusion that all I could do is really just look for the good in everything. And I look for the good in the LDS Church, and I see a lot of wonderful things and a great community of people who love each other. But I had to let go of some things that just weren't going to work. They were going to drive me further and further from happiness. So that is kind of how I live life. Some people might call me a cafeteria Mormon. Others might tell me that I'm headed off the deep end. But happiness is my goal, and I know that I wasn't intended to be alone my whole life. I'm too young for that. A couple years ago, it was conference weekend, and I was at my house, and my dad was visiting, and we were watching the news that night, and a report came on about this talk they'd been given by one of the apostles, and it played a clip of it in the report. And I felt my blood pressure just boiling. It was anger. It was just fury. And maybe that's just an overreaction, but I just felt like the poor man was clueless. You know, his insinuation in that point was that, oh, God wouldn't do that to you. Well, yes, God would. And he had a reason. And he's made a lot of beautiful people in this world just like me. And so I think you could say I've experienced anger, I've experienced sadness about a lot of it. The sadness, I think, is triggered when it's part of that understanding that there is this irreconcilable difference between the current views of the LDS Church and where I'm at. My view of God just doesn't match necessarily some of that dogmatic view that they tend to put out in talks like that. But that isn't necessarily the whole perspective of the church either. At this point, I hurt for other people. I hurt for young men who are going to go through everything that I've gone through. I hurt for these guys who are out there serving a mission, attracted to their companions, who are going to attempt to come home and get married and end up with a lot of broken dreams and a broken family, unfortunately, for them and for the women that they'll marry. The dress, you grow out of the dress. Maybe that's a good way to put it. I think growing out of that dress means that you have to, number one, accept it, and then learn somehow, some way to enjoy it, to embrace it, to see the good in life that it's given you, to see the perspective that you have that really very few other people are ever going to get in this world. And you have a great potential in your life to do an amazing amount of good with that perspective and with that feeling and that sentiment that you have. It does a lot for you, and it can do a lot for other people.